I'm Josh Harris, and you're listening to Clear and Loud, a podcast about the ideas, stories, and voices that are shaping our world. So the week before I recorded today's episode, Apple unveiled the new Vision Pro. And I watched this presentation and the announcement about this 2 times with 2 of my kids. I'm a big Apple fan, and so I was definitely geeking out and, read things on Twitter and listened to podcasts and people talking about whether or not this is going to work and whether or not it'll be adopted and how expensive it is and all these different kinds of things. The reason that I think this conversation is really interesting related to today's guest is that the world has just changed so much in regard to how we work with each other. Technology is enabling us to have these virtual, almost, real life face-to-face interactions. Apple's Vision Pro could make that even more immersive and incredible. Who knows? We'll have holograms down the road, whatever it might be. The pandemic forced a radical shift in the way that companies work, and there are all kinds of conversations these days about the benefits of remote work, the problems with remote work, being in the office, hybrid, all those kinds of things. And I just am so fascinated by all that, just that we're living through a time period where the way in which humans interact is transforming at such a rapid pace. It's incredible. My guest today has some really powerful thoughts about what really matters in all of this. And she has incredible experience when it comes to leading and managing large groups of people who are working remotely. But regardless of whether or not you are pro or against remote work, what she is advocating for is something that she calls asynchronous communication. Asynchronous communication is what Ilma Tiki really believes more companies need to understand and embrace. We're all doing it kind of unbeknownst to ourselves or without thinking. We're not being conscious about it like we should. But she has put a lot of thought and has learned from her own experience in leading multiple companies about how important it is to communicate on your own time, take the time to think, be thoughtful, objective, and intentional in the way that you're interacting and making decisions and either leading or responding to or collaborating with other people in the workplace. So let me tell you about Ilma. She is the CEO and co-founder of the Remote Company, which is the umbrella company that unites 6 different SaaS, software as a service products. And that means that she is directly and indirectly leading close to 200 people from 40 countries in 14 time zones. Oh, incredible. So she knows something about what it means to work remotely, and she's done a lot of thinking about what it means to build culture and community when you're working with a remote team with people who are spread out and from different cultures. She founded the company MailerLite. Every time I say that in this interview, it sounds like I'm saying Miller Lite. It's not a beer company that she founded. This is a marketing platform, email website platform, MailerLite, that grew. She helped to grow to have more than 1 million customers, and in 2022, the company was sold for over $90 million. So really successful businesswoman. And I'm just grateful that I got to have this conversation with her. Whatever role you play in working with others online, if you live in Slack like I do, I think you're really going to be challenged by the thoughtfulness with which Ilma brings her leadership to bear when it comes to working with her colleagues. So I came away from this conversation with tons of ideas, tons of things to implement in my own team, and I think you're going to enjoy it. Here's Ilma. Ilma, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you.
Hey Josh, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. You're in New York City, and I'm in Vancouver, and you're actually going to come here in a week. Is that right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Do, do you do a lot of travel and kind of work all over the place?
Usually when I travel for pleasure,
Yeah,
to know other culture or meet friends or sometimes colleagues, obviously. But most of my time, my team and me, we're working remotely.
right. Well, I'm really excited to talk about your thoughts about remote work and how you lead your team. Um, Maybe just to start out, how many people do you lead right now
Mhm.
in your company?
Mhm. So I mostly work with the management, and so it's not that I meet everyone, right?
Right,
But in general, I think it's like up to 200 people working together with us, and they're based in 40 countries in 14 different time zones. And obviously, they're changing their time zone because they're traveling from time to time.
right.
So,
Incredible. Wow, that's a lot of people to be to be thinking about. I guess I just love to start with your story. You started multiple companies. You sold a company for over $90 million. Like you've been very successful in business. What's your entrepreneurial journey? Where did that begin? What were the first signs that you were gonna be someone who would start and lead organizations like this?
well, if I tell it short, it might make like no logic because usually when we imagine doing any kind of career or business, um, like a line going upwards, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's more like a jungle, and you're trying to figure out where's your way, and if you want to follow someone, if you want to go somewhere where no one has been. So myself, I graduated in international marketing, but then I was working in financial sector for a while, and then I moved to art business.
Mm,
And from there, I joined my partner in technology business. So I think what I thrive doing is connecting dots that haven't been connected before.
mm,
And it doesn't matter that much if it's art or technology or bank. They all looking for innovations, creativity, for
right.
engaged people and so on. So I think we have more in common than we think we do.
Yeah,
So I'm looking of these ways where something there's a connection but it's invisible, or it might be really cool to experiment and see what happens. Yeah, so I think this is the field that I'm really eager to explore.
that's really cool. When you talk about connecting dots that are not connected, how did that kind of thinking tie into, MailerLite? Like, one of the big the company that you founded and sold. How was that kind of, problem solving at work when you started that?
Mhm. I love going to like backwards to understand, I don't know, why and what's the need and why we're doing the stuff that we're doing, right?
Yeah.
So I think even like my past experience working in a bank
Mm.
was a really great experience because I knew what it's like to work in corporation and to be in one office.
Yeah.
At the same time, it wasn't only positive. And right now, I think talking about remote, we are a bit lost on the vocabulary in general.
Yeah.
What is remote? What is hybrid? What is flexible?
Yeah.
Um, I'm thinking more from a perspective how to be inclusive organization.
Mm.
And I think often in the office, it was based on a luck that you will meet somebody at a coffee, while
Oh,
having coffee,
yeah.
or you're seeing that people are connected and engaged because you're having CSD beers. even though there's maybe a single mom that is not drinking beer and would never be able to stay, right? I
Right.
think there were so many, and it's still there. There's like a lot of things that we just don't notice,
Mhm.
especially if like a general picture, it's like, oh, everybody's laughing, even though they're laughing into the same groups, and
Yeah.
it's really hard for someone new to interrupt and enter the group, right?
Right, right.
Um, yeah, so I think even for us, we started as a company being in one office in Lithuania, in Vilnius,
Yeah.
and then we grew into global business. So at some point, we started calling ourselves remote first organization. And at that point, it was only one team member working from home, evening hours in Lithuania.
Interesting.
Uh,
And
and it was,
this was MailerLite?
yeah, it was like 9 years ago, right?
Interesting.
So I understood that just because he's the one talking with our customers, he can't miss any information, right? He
Yeah.
has to feel the pulse of the company. So it
Mhm.
means that we can't shout in the office all the ideas. Everything has to be written so that you won't miss anything not being in the office, right? So
Right.
I think, it's more about intentional and why and what you're doing and what you want to achieve.
Mhm.
So this one team member he's with us for 9 years. He's still with us.
Oh, neat.
So he was uh, the reason why we're like starting being like more intentional. For example, I love art, right?
Mm.
So I would bring the whole team to the art exhibition to meet an artist, to have whatever museum guided tour. But when you have more and more remote people, you
Yeah.
think, how can you do that for everyone instead of us leaving office and somebody still at their laptop working?
Right.
So we ended up having creative days. So once a quarter, everybody has a free paid day when they have to go out and explore something for the first time. The only rule is that afterwards you have to write the text about it and share pictures and videos if you have any.
Amazing.
And it started, just thinking how we can make it for the whole team to be inclusive,
Yeah.
to have like guidelines instead of telling what to do, right?
Because the kind of team building exercise that you can do when you're all in the same office is just not the same when you have people spread out in different time zones and different
Of course.
places. That's so
But
interesting.
at the same time, it's really like, it's so much fun to see what they have been up to. This is
Right.
how I know about exhibitions in LA. Like there was one colleague that did internship in the flower shop for that day.
Oh,
And
wow.
she was telling the story how positive it was because every time somebody's coming and they're like buying flowers for somebody for some kind of
Yeah.
celebration, usually, right?
Right.
So I think sharing the joy and making not like one fits all, but it's up to you what you want to do. You can do
Yeah.
something, with your friends or your family.
Mhm.
Whereas in the office, most probably you are a bit limited what you can do all together, especially if your office like is like a big bag, let's say, right?
Right. What's your opinion on the kind of battle that's happening with, company owners and CEOs demanding that everybody come back into the office or really feeling like there's something being lost by not having that direct interaction? Like, do you personally, obviously your business is based on this, so you're a little biased, but like, do you think it's just never going to go back to the way it was before the pandemic? Is this just a new reality that businesses have to adapt to and have to learn to lead differently in?
Yeah, I think I'm not like against offices. I
Uh-huh.
mean, I live in New York and people love offices here in New York because maybe then they just want to go outside, right?
Yeah.
That's the lifestyle of the city.
Yeah.
Um, but it was, I think, an exceptional experiment for the whole world to
Yeah.
understand what's right way for you to work and
Mm.
what you expect, how you expect to work. And I think for some people, especially for parents, going to an office and spending 10 hours there is a struggle if you have your kids at
It's
school or in
true. Yeah.
kindergarten, right?
Mhm.
So I think it's kind of more like practicalities why people want to stay at home
Mhm.
because they have life. And I think it's for us, I think
Uh,
the main discussion that we're having right now is more about people. They don't want to separate work and life. They
Hmm.
want to come to the work wholesome, right?
Mm.
Instead of pretending that no, like I don't care about kids when I'm working or whatever.
Right.
If your kid is sick, you would prefer to stay at home with a nanny
Yeah.
next to your kid instead of going to the office, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that I see is I think it's really connected with the fear of especially middle management,
Mm.
because what do you do when you don't see the people? I think it's really tricky because we don't talk enough about it.
Mm.
It is really challenging to manage people that are based in different time zones,
Yeah.
where it's really hard, maybe to trust them and to
Yeah.
manage them. In our case, we for a long time we're hiring people who knew how to work remotely. We didn't have to convince them to change
Because
the lifestyle.
they were already
Yeah,
trained to think in that way. Yeah.
yeah. So I think it's there's like more questions, and I think from my perspective, I advise everyone just to go back and remember, was there everything really good about the office? Maybe you can skip some stuff,
Yeah.
right? And at the same time, remember COVID. Maybe there was something that you learned. It was really like fun and great to do. Uh, I don't like hybrid or remote or whatever, flexible. I would say that it's better to make a choice if it's remote first or office first,
Mm.
because it's a mindset. So
Yeah.
if it's office first, it means that all the main and important decisions are being made in the office. So if you want to make a career, if you want to be involved, you have to come. And
Mm.
then the company says it's like 2 times a day, whatever, 2 times a week,
Right.
once a year, whatever it is, right? And if it's a remote one, you have an office, but all the decisions and all the main discussions are being done online. So I think that's a bit more simple way to separate these two approaches.
Interesting. So you actually think that trying to call something hybrid where you don't define which one is first causes problems?
Oh, yes. I think everybody's lost in the vocabulary right now.
Interesting. Well, you introduced me to a term, which I mean, I understand the concept because this is the way we're all kind of working right now, but you're a champion of the concept of asynchronous communication. And I'm just wondering if you could give me a quick rundown. What do you mean by that? What does that mean, and why do you think it's an important thing for people to understand?
Mhm. So asynchronous communication means that is the communication that is done not on, like, we don't have to be at the same time in the same
Yeah.
space to communicate, right?
Mm.
So often it is most, I mean, it doesn't have to be, but most probably it's written.
Mhm.
And what I you can do video as well, right? But what I like about writing is that there's no way to write anything without thinking. And I
Yeah.
think when we write, we are much more intentional because you can you see the words that you use, right? And you
Mhm.
can delete them. Usually, you are much less emotional, and I think writing in general, this is what people do when they want to reflect and so on,
Mhm.
right? So I believe that writing as a skill is like the most underrated skill,
Mm.
and especially in tech because developers they are writing code.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, the whole hiring process is based on interviews and us talking on real time and selling ourselves.
Yeah.
So in our case, and I think especially if you are a distributed team and you're based in different time zones, obviously you have a lot of writing,
Yeah.
and like even small things. I love talking, and I'm the one full of ideas. And at the beginning in the office, I would just shout out an idea that I'm having, and everybody would surround me and be like, "Oh, that's a nice idea," blah blah blah. Like it was a disruptive, thing to do when I
Oh,
see
funny. Yeah.
how I see it right now.
Right.
So when we started working like as a remote press organization,
Yeah.
we asked everybody to write ideas.
Mm.
And when you start writing, this is when you realize that maybe it's not the best idea in the world because you just
Mhm.
start thinking and going backwards. What kind of resources you're going to need, what the competitors are doing, and so on.
Mm.
So I think First, it's really useful when you are like based and distributed to different time zones.
Mhm.
And then it's just easier to do, because we are thinking differently. Some people need
Mhm.
time to kind of get the information and think about it and then
Yeah.
reply instead of like in brainstorming sessions that is done,
Mhm.
right now, right here. So I think writing down a document with your idea and sharing with your team
Mhm.
and asking them to comment in 24 hours most probably is going to be a better outcome than just having a brainstorm where nobody's ready to reply.
That's so true. Yeah, because some people don't necessarily do their best thinking on their feet or in the moment or even spoken.
Exactly. And they're
That
like really smart people. You do
yeah.
want to hear their opinion.
Well, there's so many things I want to talk about from what you just said. The first thing that you commented was just like a short comment, but you said that so much of the work that takes place today relies on being able to think through writing and to communicate in that way. And yet, most of our interview processes are spoken and have to do with how you perform in a spoken, interview.
Yes.
How do you try to overcome that issue in the way that you hire for your company? Do you do more written communication with people in the interview process?
Yeah, it's mostly written. We start with questions that people have to answer just to begin the application process. Because when you hire globally, you have no idea about the names of workplaces or universities. So at the same time, giving some extra work to begin with is a great
Mhm.
filter to get motivated people. Um, at the same time, usually they do spend some time checking on us as well.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing because this is how they find out if we are really a great fit for them.
Mhm.
So we start with writing like why they want to join us and which value is the one that they can relate the most with from our company so that we could be
Oh,
like
that's
on
so
the same
smart.
page.
Yeah.
Then they're getting test assignment and it's written as well, usually depending on the position, obviously.
Yeah.
An interview is like the last stage because I think interview is the most biased thing that you can
Yes.
do.
Right.
If you like the energy, you can hire whoever, right?
Right.
So we are leaving that at the end when we already know that they're qualified, that we like them professionally, that they have the right skills and so on.
So smart.
Yeah, and this is how you kind of check their
Yeah.
chemistry.
I'm just curious, what, like, platform or tool do you use for all of that, question asking and back and forth for hiring?
Actually, we built a tool for ourselves because we
Oh, I
couldn't
knew you were
find
gonna say
anything.
I knew you were gonna say that.
Yeah, so
Uh,
it's called my Zen team. And yeah, and yeah, because it's like I think it's pretty new still,
right.
pretty new
So
approach, but it saves a lot of time,
amazing.
for
So
everyone.
so the one of your you have multiple companies. Your the kind of overall company, the remote company invests in and builds different companies related to remote work, which I just think is so cool. But my Zen team actually has a feature in it for the hiring process. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. So it's still hidden, but it's the one that we already use for ourselves, and it
Oh,
has
okay.
more features. It's mostly about team engagement that
Yeah,
is based on asynchronous communication.
I
Because
see.
when you say engagement, somehow people they all think about team buildings,
Yeah,
or they think about I don't know Zoom game that you play together right
yeah,
now, right here.
right.
But I think there's so many different ways you can actually engage and know a bit more about each other
Mhm.
rather than having meeting together on the same time.
Right, right. Um, I was talking to a friend and, we were talking about some other I can't even remember the name of the tool, but it was basically something that was, like, generating different questions for people to answer on remote teams, and they were complaining about their experience where it just felt like there was so many things to read from people, and it was overwhelming and so on. What what's your opinion about, tools that engage on Slack or ask questions daily or weekly or whatever it might be? What's the role of that? Is it useful in your mind?
I think you always know your own organization and what it needs. If you're
Yeah.
having a meeting in the office, maybe you don't need that. But
Right.
I think giving opportunity to know a bit more about the person, their name and position, it's really
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
because it's just easier to start conversation if you need something, right? So
Right.
in our case, when somebody is joining the remote company or any
Mhm.
of our companies, they're doing Pecha Kucha presentation about themselves.
Hmm.
So it's like a format of presentation, 6 minutes and 14 seconds. So it's like 20 slides that are changing automatically every 20 seconds. And it's the topic is you. It's totally up to you what you want to tell about yourself. Some
Right.
people would talk about education, their professional achievements. Some of them, if they're like from Latin America, we're gonna meet all the cousins and all the uncles,
That's so
everyone.
great.
We're gonna know how they met the wife and whatever. But the thing is that because it's the starting point, it's even for me, when you have like more than 100 people working with you,
Yeah.
it's a really easy way to remember people and the stories. Because we are social, animals. We need
Yeah.
stories. This is how we connect. And it's not that we are just CEO or manager of someone, right?
Yeah.
It's like, as I was telling before, it's more like we are wholesome people and we
Right.
have hobbies and maybe we have something in common that
Mm.
it will take ages for us to realize.
Yeah.
So I think every company should understand why they're doing one thing or another. If it works, maybe it worked for 3 months and it's not
Right.
working, so it should stop, right?
Yeah.
But even the creative day, I mean, some people at some point stopped sharing their pictures from the creative day. And we said, you know what? It's actually really important for us
Yeah.
because we are based in so many different time zones and different teams. And some of the people would never have anything in common.
Mm.
So when you explain why it's important,
Mhm.
I think, yeah, I think, and that's the main thing, right? Being on the same page
Right.
together.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess any practice can become, meaningless if you don't remember the purpose behind it and keep investing in it and so on.
Exactly.
So that's so good. Um, are there particular ways that you train your team in asynchronous communication? Like, I guess when I read some of your thinking on this, I thought, oh, I kind of just took this for granted. Like, okay, we're on Slack, we're communicating on Slack and so on. But do you actually uh like proactively say, here's how I want you to work, or here's how I expect you to answer, or like what's the culture that you've built around that so that they really understand how to function?
Yeah, I think the worst that can happen is if people need to guess or assume,
Mm,
because then it's like overthinking and it's really complicated to guess what you expect me to write on Slack or how we are doing it on Slack or whatever,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So I think it's not even about the tools themselves, but the way you use them. So
right.
we are really particular in like super detailed how we use Slack. That
Really?
you have to start the channels, the ones who are like connected directly with your job. That you every channel has specific topic, and if we see that there's like more than one topic in one channel, we're gonna separate that.
Oh,
It
wow.
means that you don't have to be afraid to over communicate because you know that everybody that is in this channel, they made a choice and they want to be there
Right.
and they want to learn about that topic, whatever it is, right? At the same time, we do have like non-work related channels as well,
Mhm.
and everybody can create them and they have to write about that on the general. Like, but we are super super specific. How like at the same time we use status. We want everyone to have at least 2 3 hours a day when they are like doing deep work and when they're focused
Yeah.
during the time on the Slack channel that they would like have status that I'm in deep work until 2.
Oh, interesting.
So you know that when you're writing them, they're not getting a notification. But at the same
Mhm.
time, you know that most probably at 2, they're going to go back and answer you.
Mhm.
Even the way we write messages is a bit different. Like I would never say that, Josh, I need you right now. Like I needed something yesterday. And you would say,
Right.
yeah, just a minute. I mean, I would be super particular with all the links and being like, I don't want, just because my team can be based in New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
You have to write the message that needs as few follow ups as possible, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same with the reply. You won't say that I'm gonna take a look at it. You're gonna say that I'm gonna take a look until Thursday. If you don't get my message until that, I don't know, remind me, whatever it is, right? So it's like
Right.
super intentional.
Mhm.
And this is yeah, we have written all of that. And this is what we talk about in the onboarding. I mean, we're going even like me, myself, and every manager has personal user manuals for us how to work with me,
Oh my goodness.
uh, because you don't want people to get like, what does it mean when you're getting, a message from Ilma on Saturday evening? So I'm super specific saying that just usually a message when I have an idea, you don't have to react until it's Monday.
Oh my goodness. So you're just
But
like you're
that's
saying this is how I work and this is what I
yes,
expect in communication so that they know how to interact
yes,
with you. That is
yeah.
I've never heard of that before. That is so smart.
But I think this is how you can then focus on
Yeah.
something that is really meaningful. Because I mean, I'm always telling a story about imagine you're like it's your first week in some organization
Mhm.
and you had an appointment with your dentist on Tuesday afternoon.
Mhm.
What do you do? Like, if it's an office, most probably gonna ask people around, like,
Yeah.
what do they do, right?
Yeah.
But if it you're like you're on your own, you just join the company, like you have no idea whom to ask and what to do and even where to start.
Yeah.
Most probably you would just cancel it, right? But I think there's so many different super practical daily stuff where
Yeah.
we're trying to guess or assume
Yeah.
or use our previous experience
Mhm.
instead of telling and being upwards that this is how we do.
Right.
And because I think we have to understand that every manager is different,
Mhm.
and for people to understand that sometimes it's hard, and it takes time, right? So I think it's much more better to write how to work with me, and it's a great actually exercise for anyone. Just write that to understand for yourself. Do you prefer emails or Slack or phone, and when?
That is so brilliant. I is there a resource or a book or, that you would point people to? Because I wanna do this with my team. I've never, like, actually done this. And even the way that you're using Slack, like, are there ways that you
Yeah.
train other people in how to do this?
Yeah, so you can go just to my zenteam.com blog and you will find articles about how to work with me and about Slack as well. And soon, I'm not sure when our podcast will be released, I'm publishing the book called Leaving the Base Camp.
Oh my
So that's kind of
gosh, okay.
story about MailerLite and how we built global company, distributed company, and bootstrapped everything. So obviously we had our, I don't know, experiments.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So I didn't realize this book was coming. When is the book being released?
I mean, it was kind of released last year in Lithuania. So now
Okay.
we're getting ready to release it on Amazon, and I hope it's going to be this summer.
Oh, that's exciting. Okay. Oh, that's really cool. My I've gone away from being a podcast host to just thinking about my own team and wanting to like get all this information from you so that I can implement all of this. Um, we're talking a lot about Slack, and I'm just curious, what are your feelings towards Slack?
I love it. I
Do
mean,
you
I
love it?
think it's just, yeah, I do. And, but I don't think that it's like about the Slack itself,
Yeah,
right? It's
it's just
much
one.
more
It's just
that.
one tool.
And yeah, and one tool, and I think what I like about it is that we're really precise how we use it.
Hmm.
So, and yeah, because it's like a car or like anything. Like it
Yeah.
depends on the surroundings. Like I live in New York City, so I don't need a car. But
Right.
in some places, there's like no way to survive without a car. So I
Interesting.
think it's more about yeah, thinking because we don't use any email, and just because we are working and communicating asynchronously, it's really a great way,
Mhm.
yeah, to communicate using the app.
Do you know of other alternatives out there or, like, project management tools that you see coming up that you think, "Oh, that could dethrone Slack," or I'm just curious of other tools that you're keeping your eye on?
I don't know. I think there's so many of them right now.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
there's like no way to know what's coming. Uh, Another tool that we are using a lot, it's called Notion.
Oh, of course.
So on
Yeah.
Notion, like the communication and all the documents and everything is written in Notion for us.
Yeah.
Because we have a handbook and part of it actually we're sharing online as well.
Oh, amazing.
What I love about it is that you don't have to read everything. You can just, they have a search. So
Yeah.
whatever you have a question, you can just Google, like not Google, search
Yeah, but
on
search on your
Notion
Notion page, right?
and it's there. So
Yeah.
it means that I love giving tools to empower and enable my team to make
Yeah.
decisions when I'm sleeping.
That's so good.
And I
Yeah.
think that's another kind of thing about asynchronous communication, because we can have an amazing meeting, but when it's end, that's it. Only two of
Mhm.
us knew what was
Right.
written, like what was said, right?
Mhm.
Um, when you write it down, I think it's even easier to uh, amend it
Yeah.
because then you're like saying we're changing this sentence
Right.
and it used to be like this right now.
Yeah.
When we first started writing down how we work, I was surprised that actually we're never on the same page. I
Oh,
would write
interesting.
down and people, oh really? I never thought that we're actually doing it.
Oh, wow. So you can have a lot more misunderstanding when you're just speaking about things because people think, "Oh, that's what they mean," or, whatever, but
Yeah.
when you write it down, it forces you to see where you actually disagree maybe.
Yeah, and I think having same vocabulary is important
Mm.
as well because when you read and it's different instead of what oh my god, like I expect that you're gonna do this,
Yeah.
or I assume that people
Mhm.
from Canada are like this,
Right.
and they're not.
Right. Right.
So I think it's just interesting because often we start with the way that we think that we're similar, right? In our case, because we're based in 40 different countries, our starting point that we are different and we have to understand how to work together, right?
Mm.
So I'm even sharing a video and an article and some more kind of material about cultural differences.
Oh, wow.
When
Yeah.
we write how to work with me, the first question is that how do you do? Is it a question or is it a greeting? And it's different based on the
Yeah.
countries. I
Yeah.
mean, back in Lithuania, people always usually they say I'm bad and then they tell a story.
Really?
It's the same with like, northern countries in Europe as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you're not aware of that, you can miss
Mm.
a lot of context. So I think it's really important to understand that the way we use, I don't know, smile emojis
Yeah.
might be different based on your generation, right?
That's true. My kids make fun of me for the emojis I use. I'm very uncool with my emojis, so it's true. Language barriers, emoji generation gap barriers, there is all kinds of things.
Yeah, and if you start saying that, you know what, this is who I am, you can read my how to work with me, you can
Yeah,
see my Pecha Kucha, whatever. But then if something is wrong, please tell me, or something that you don't understand,
right,
like because we might be very different, just because
right.
we came from different cultures, different professional backgrounds. So I think it's really helpful, especially when you work remotely, because
Mm,
if your company is silent and remote,
yeah,
it's really, really bad.
yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, the very, like, intentional way that you lead your team is so appealing to me, and I think it probably companies that are like yours, that are intentional and lead their remote teams in such a specific way, I would imagine have a real advantage when it comes to hiring. Like, that's the kind of company that people remote company that people would want to work for. And if you don't if you're not doing those things, it can, there's just like this vacuum of leadership and you don't feel connected and maybe are more prone to be dissatisfied in your work and so on. Like, do you see the positive results of just morale and excitement for the company because of these practices?
I mean, these practices are not status quo. We're still changing. We are growing, and it's like it's not that we know everything.
Sure.
But I think we had a big luxury of time that we could experiment. We were
Mm.
not like, just COVID came and we closed down. For us,
Oh, right.
nothing much changed. So I think we have that big advantage. And right now, even job ads, you can see that the companies that were working remotely before COVID, they would always write that because they know how to do that.
Interesting.
So yeah, but I think it's not even, I'm not like I'm going a bit further from the remote
Mm.
in a way that you do need intention in the office as well.
Yeah.
I think the only thing is that you can, you still have, you can be spontaneous and maybe if you have good luck, you're going to meet CEO or whatever in the,
Yeah.
in the elevator.
Right.
So you have these interactions just because everybody's in the same space. But talking about like engagement and so many things, I think there's a lot of stuff that could be rethink in the office environment as well.
Yeah. What do you think about company culture? Like, that's such a buzzword these days. When you think about your own companies, what what does that mean? What is company culture, building culture, healthy culture? Like, how do you think about that?
The culture thing it's funny because it doesn't matter if you do anything about, like, you can't do nothing about it and you're still gonna have a culture,
That's
right?
true. Yeah.
The
That's
only
true.
thing it might be the one that you're not the fan of.
Yeah. Right.
So I think culture is something, if you have some vision what you
Yeah.
want it to be, it's better kind of to act upon it and do
Yeah.
something about it. And this is why you do want kind of, to have onboardings, not just talking about the product but talking about the culture and what you expect people to do.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
my onboarding presentation is about the engagement and why it's important,
Mm.
because we are based in different countries, in different time zones. We are in different teams. So if you don't go that extra mile,
Mhm.
at some point we're gonna be really in different silos, and
Mhm.
then it will be really hard for us to connect. So yeah, so I think every organization is different, and the only thing that is it's interesting that we have a lot of conversations about the cultures and about the values, and
Yeah.
they're all written down on the walls. You
Right.
have all the posters, and often they're like more like a vision instead of with trying to sit down and to understand where we are right now, and to
Yeah.
start with that. A
Mhm.
lot of companies are talking about something that they want to be,
Right.
and without even knowing if it's possible and how they could achieve that.
Mm.
Or they're talking about, I don't know, integration, globalization, and other Asians, but you have no idea what does it mean. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously, like we are all positive, but what does it mean? Because in our case, we have a value that we are positive. And at some point, we became too much positive because people stopped sharing bad things.
Oh, wow. They stopped
So
being
right
honest
now,
about what wasn't working.
yeah, so it's like then you're going like backwards and you're like writing that behavior they expect people
Yeah.
to have. So it's maybe we're not positive, maybe we have a growth mindset, right? Because
Yeah.
I think when you use words, you can still always come back and change them,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
especially if it's written.
Right. No, that's really interesting that, it's funny that you wouldn't think that being positive would ever be a problem, but actually you have to be specific about the actual activities and behaviors that are taking place and what that
Yeah,
means.
yeah, yeah. And I think, we don't want to be yeah, so this is why like I talk a lot about like evolution, because you do have to evolve to change, and
Yeah.
it's easier to change when everything is still good.
Yeah.
because we have time
Right.
instead of change when you're going already down the hill
Mm.
and you have to be fast and you have to be right.
Yeah.
In our case, like, so recently last year I introduced bets. So we asking people to make bets. So it's not a plan that will fail, but it's a bet. It's something like just to try something new.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And then it's easy to say, oh, like in my bet was like, I was wrong. It's
Right.
not a big thing,
Yeah.
but I think, and this is how we kind of, that's my way of thinking how to, not just to say that we have growth mindset,
Yeah.
but we actually do about it
You're
something,
actually
right?
taking
Together.
taking little risks, but it's a fun
Yes.
way to do it. It's a way of saying,
Yeah,
I think this could
exactly.
work. I'm gonna try this. That's
Yeah.
really good. That's really good. Um, when you look ahead at the way that, businesses are changing and evolving and so on, um, are there any things that, about the future of work that maybe excite you or maybe concern you or that you think are challenges that business owners have to be thinking about?
I'm always excited about the future.
Yeah, that's great.
I think there's so much that can be made, and especially with all the new technologies. And I think
Mhm.
obviously, like pandemic wasn't something that was a good thing for the world, but at the same time, it was the first time when we had that moment all together as the
Yeah,
planet, like as
right.
human beings. I think we became much more empathetic because there's
Interesting.
something that we all experience together.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
I believe that you grow only when you have really had and complicated experiences
Mhm.
instead of just having fun together, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, I think I want to hear more companies talking about like wholesome people. I want companies to talk more about inclusivity than diversity because
Mm.
diversity is usually it's a number.
Mm.
Um, and inclusivity is like behavior, what you do about your team members.
Mm.
I love remote work in a way, not just that you work from home, but that you can hire somebody from different country. And this is how we
Yeah,
can go out of your bubble. In
yeah.
my team, we have, I don't know, a developer in Bangladesh together with a developer in Brazil.
Mm.
And this is how you become more aware of what's going on in Brazil, or if it's like
Right.
a flood in Bangladesh, right?
Mhm.
I think we need more connections, like global connections,
Mm.
especially with the issues that are coming in the
Yeah,
future. And I think we have to kind of celebrate our differences instead of staying in the bubbles where we fit in.
right.
Um, so I hope to see more of it in any organization.
2 technologies that are, filling up the news these days, and I'm just curious how you think they relate to, uh, remote work and how people interact and so on. The first is AI. Um, Obviously, there are all kinds of ways that this technology can advance and so on, but I was hearing about how people were starting to basically someone was saying to me, I think this person is using, a chatbot to respond to emails because just the sound of their their responses just sounds slightly off. And I was laughing at the idea of like, our chatbots emailing each other back and forth and we're not even involved and so on. I'm just wondering with AI, and you talked about the importance of writing and the importance of the thought that forces us to do you see AI as shortcutting something important if it's being used in those ways for back and forth communication?
I use AI and I love it
Mhm.
because English is not my native language, right? And we have to realize that for most of people in the world, it's not.
That's true, yeah.
So it's really helpful to express yourself better. At the same time, I think you still have to be creative to get something useful out of AI, right?
Yeah,
So a lot of people are learning how to write prompts to get
right.
really great results.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's just a tool. I don't think they're gonna conquer the world, but I think it's a great tool, and
Mm,
I'm willing to see what's next. At the same time, I think there was there were so many texts and so many content that made already no sense that were
Yeah.
written by people, like for
That's a
SEO
good
purposes, right?
that's a great point. The humans are already writing nonsense, so don't come down on the robots. The robots are actually doing fine.
So it's like I think it's a a challenge for humanity to be
Yeah,
more creative, right?
yeah, right.
And yeah, I think comparing to all the emojis and all the other stuff that was innovation years ago,
Yeah,
I prefer AI with text and images.
yeah, that's so funny. Are you doing any kind of training with your teams to say, "Here, here's how we should be benefiting from AI," and giving them guidance in that?
We have Slack channels for AI
Okay, yeah.
where people share what they have learned. We just introduced AI for our customers at MailerLite.
Oh, very
So
cool.
instead of having an empty page for your newsletter, you
Yeah,
can already start, with some ideas from AI if you know how to write prompts.
right.
So I think it's still very new, right? So
Mm,
we are all searching the ways we can use it better.
yeah,
And yeah, so we don't do any formal training for now.
yeah,
But yeah, but for sure we are on top of it and
that's good.
checking and using and experimenting with that technology.
Well, the other technology, and this is sort of a funny part about where you and I met. Um, but what the technology that I was thinking about was Apple's new Vision Pro.
Yeah,
These goggles that are kind of I'm trying to think of their what's the word that they use? It's not
spatial computer.
spatial computing, thank you. I watched the presentation twice, and I already forgot. I'm so sorry, Tim Cook. Spatial computing. And, part of the question that I have with this technology, I'm a big Apple fan, so I'm always hoping that their products will do well, but, is this gonna be world changing like the iPhone, or is this going to be a blip and it's kinda like the iPad where it's like, "Ah, yeah, that's nice," but it's not that big of a deal. But a big thing that they're emphasizing is the communication piece, and the idea of interacting with colleagues in a way that feels much more present, interacting with them remotely. So you have your team spread out all over the world, but with, Vision Pro glasses or whatever, it feels like they're in the room with you and so on. And what this reminds me of is the fact that you and I met at South by Southwest at, this little, like, lounge or something where they were doing a demonstration of the 3D hologram
Yeah,
box. Do you remember that?
yeah, 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 yeah.
And I was really blown away by this hologram and how, lifelike it was. Do you think that that kind of technology is going to become a bigger and bigger part of how we interact with coworkers in different parts of the world?
I don't know, I mean, I could envision myself watching movies using the goggles
Yeah, for sure.
or maybe reading a book. I mean, I because I'm not into gaming, so for
Yeah,
me, I think I'm missing part of the game because I
sure.
won't be using that for it.
Mhm.
Um, at the same time, when a company like Apple is making a bet on remote work,
Yeah,
you do understand that most probably that is the future. And
yeah,
it's like inevitable, right?
right.
Um, at the same time, I'm a fan of asynchronous communication, so I
Yeah,
don't need goggles.
right. Well, that's what I think is so interesting because it's like just because you have this technology that makes it, like this 3D kind of whatever image of someone else that you're talking to, it doesn't necessarily mean that's gonna be the best way to think and to ideate and to create and to interact. So I just find that really
I mean, I
fascinating.
think it's just one, like seeing you, it's kind of fun, but there's
Yeah,
like other ways for us to, connect. Like
right.
my best friend lives in Vancouver, just like you, and we are having weekly walks together. I don't see her. I hear her right in
Yeah,
my,
you got your,
So
AirPods in, yeah.
so she's somewhere, in Vancouver, and I'm in New York City, and we are walking and talking, right? And for me, it's actually it's a great way because I think when we walk, our mind is actually working. I think
Yeah,
something different happens, right? We
that's
see the
true.
horizon, we
Mhm.
see like our cityscape landscape is changing and
Mhm.
so on. So I think there's a lot of ways to communicate. It's just
Mhm.
we just have to select why and what we want to use instead of
Mhm.
pushing everyone to be somewhere at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. That is such I'm so excited that you are, first of all, building these companies that are helping people, with remote work, but also writing about this and speaking about this, because I really feel like you're pushing people to actually think about what's happening in the way they work, not so much just like you're saying remote or in person and so on. It's like, what's actually the most effective way to engage with team members from different cultures and time zones? And you're not just overcoming that, you're actually benefiting from slowing things down and interacting at different
And
time,
thinking more
thinking
instead
more.
of
Yeah,
reacting. I think
exactly.
what often we just react to stuff, right? We're just all the time
Yes.
reacting instead of sitting and thinking because it's like it's easier to do to
Yeah.
react.
Well, I mean, I'm really challenged by this because I'm just realizing, like, the way that I interact with my colleagues on Slack, I've never communicated clearly what my expectations are or ask them, about that. And so it's usually just this sense of I need to respond as quickly as possible to every message, which is overwhelming and
Yeah.
which crowds out the ability to be thoughtful. Like,
Yes.
the reality is, like, my team, I'd rather them respond more slowly, but with more creativity and more thoughtfulness and more strategic thinking than give me a quick answer and, they got back to
Yeah.
me, whatever, and it wasn't as thought
Yeah.
out, so
But you do like engagement is all about agreeing to do something together,
mm,
right? It's not like engagement. It's like, right, you know what you want to expect from other person. So
yeah,
you just can play around and say that, I don't know, let's have deep work for 3 hours and
right,
let's come back to Slack at 2 or whatever it
yeah,
is. I think it's just good, for the team to instead of doing the stuff that you always did,
yeah,
to try out like tweak it, like,
yeah,
change it a bit from time to
exactly.
time.
Try different, approaches.
Especially if that you already feel that
Mm,
irritates you, right? I'm
yeah,
sure you are not the only one.
yeah, for sure. No, that's really good, that's really good. Um, I'm wondering what, you've been very successful in business. You've sold a company. You could just be in Bali on a beach right now, I guess. What motivates you to like keep building and keep starting companies and all of the hassle of leadership and so on? Like what is it
Mhm.
inside you that makes you want to do that?
Well, one thing is that I never used business as an excuse not to do something.
Hmm.
So I was in Bali,
Good for you.
you know. So I have a kid. I was always traveling. We would spend every winter somewhere out in Bali, Australia, or South
I
Africa, or
love it.
California. So I think that's important as well to have the balance instead of
Yeah.
being all in one place and then being burnt out and
Yeah.
need healing after something.
Right.
So I think that it should be already there. And if you want to go to Bali, it's great. Actually, one of the things that we're doing with the management, I'm always asking them to do a jungle test. Is that you're supposed to go to a place in a jungle for 30 days without any internet connection and see what happens with your team. Because if you don't, maybe it doesn't have to be like, the whole month, but we did it for 2 weeks with one manager. And he was getting ready for the whole 6 months to do that just because he was micromanaging so much.
Oh,
He wasn't
okay. Yeah.
delegating enough and he had
I
no.
thought you were saying take the whole team into the jungle. You That's
No, no, no. Like team is
Yeah,
working, but you are in the jungle, and I
yeah,
think it's actually a good practice for a manager
yeah,
because just to check, because you do want to grow other leaders as well. You do want to
yeah,
empower people to make decisions, right? If everybody's just following what you're saying, it's kind of okay, but then you can't go to Bali.
Right. So to lead in such a way that you're able to go off the grid and go to the jungle for however long, and they can all keep going because they know the vision and they're empowered to make
Yeah,
decisions.
exactly.
Wow, that's really cool. That's really good stuff. Ilma, I'm so happy that I met you, and I'm really so inspired by the way that you think and the ideas that you're putting out into the world. And I'm so honored that you would come on the podcast and talk with me. I want to get your book when it comes out. I want to go to and read some of the blogs that you're doing. And my Slack channel and my team is going to be, I think, much better served because of this conversation. So thank you.
Great to hear that. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Clear and Loud podcast. I'm your host, Josh Harris. Our producer is Pam Cameron, and this episode contains music by Jeremy Yaddo at Music for Podcasts. If you like what you hear, give us a boost by subscribing or leaving a review on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen. We'd also love your feedback on today's episode. Or if you have a question you'd like addressed on a future episode or a guest you'd like us to consider, email us at hello@clearandloud.com. You can also shoot us a direct message on Instagram. Our handle is @clearandloud. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.